How is everybody getting on? You're looking fantastic. Welcome to this Fireside chat. My name is Brian, and we are here to talk about scaling. And I have two absolutely exceptional humans to my left that I'm going to introduce in a second. But before that, one thing just to call out here as well is that if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, if you could submit them in the app, that would be fantastic, and then we'll get to all of those questions towards the end as well, which would be great. Okay, so to my left, I have Sandra Healy, CEO and founder of Inclusio, and Brendan Noud, CEO and co-founder of LearnUpon. So what I would love to do just to kick off and to start off the session is if you could give a brief introduction on both companies. Sandra, will start with yourself, and if you could also touch on team size, funding, and the overall vision of the company as well, that would be exceptional.
Great, good afternoon. Thanks for listening in today. So Inclusio, we set out back in 2016 to solve a problem for global employers, and that was how do we bring a scientific evidence-based approach to measuring something that is inherently difficult to measure. That's culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion for employers. We spun the idea into Dublin City University, and over 4 years in research and development, we spun out in 2020 into COVID, into our first investment round. So we describe what we do as bringing a scientific evidence-based approach to measuring culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've raised over 6.2 million investments to date. We've about 30 people on the team. And our vision is to get inclusio into every workplace in the world.
Amazing. That's substantial. Brendan?
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Brendan Noud. I'm the co-founder and CEO of LearnUpon. We started in 2012. We're a cloud-based learning management system that companies around the world use to deliver training to their employees, customers, partners, resellers. We work with mainly US companies, about 70% of our business. We're currently scaling in Europe, and we've about 260 people now, and we've raised about 56 million. We did a CSF, a HPSU round in 2013 and 2016, and then we did a Series A round with Summit Partners in 2020, late 2020. So. And our vision is to help every company unlock the power of learning, and we're very focused on helping companies deliver the right learning to the right people at the right time.
Amazing. So I think it's amazing to start off a session with an introduction like this and to hear about the vision and the mission and also the size of the company, because it helps to really paint a picture of what is the experience, where is the company going, and what can we really dig into here. So I think for myself, after working with numerous amounts of other companies as they started to go from conceptual or at the very ideation stage all the way through to maturity, one of the big questions that tends to resonate or come up quite a lot is really, how do you make your first decision on hiring? At what point do you press the button internally, and what is the main piece of information that you would take on board to make your first hire? Things that would resonate here with me would be having a certain amount of money in the bank, or there not being enough time in the day that it's now time to spread the wings. What would be, or what was during your history the first point where you decided, you know what, it is now time to grow past the founding team and to make our first hire? Sandra, over to you.
Yeah, I think bringing on your co-founders is a really important step, and I think for me, it was looking at what skills gaps were missing from my perspective and who did I need in my co-founding team. So there's myself and Deborah Murphy and Arta Labambo, so the three of us essentially built the team initially in DCU. I think when we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we often talk about, and you may have heard about culture fit and culture add. When we talk to companies and about building teams, we talk about culture add. You're hiring for what somebody will bring to the team rather than looking will they fit in. But I think the best piece of advice I heard, and particularly with your early team, is hire for culture fit, because they are the ones that set the culture for the organization. So I think it's really important that you think about how people are aligned to your values. Do they think and act like founders? Certainly from our perspective, we're a social impact business. Really important for me that we have people who work for us that are as committed as we are around social impact and having an impact in the world. Sometimes those people can be hard to find, but I think, when you live those values and that's who you are as a company, I think you find that you start to attract that type of talent towards you as well. So my piece of advice would be in, your early team, maybe the first 10 people in the business, culture fit, and after that really, laser focus on the culture add and building a really rich, diverse team that ultimately brings innovation then into your product and into your business.
Brendan?
Thanks. From our perspective, I think it was that kind of trade-off between my co-founder is Des, so he's the techie brains behind the company, and I was very much focused on the sales side and helped out on support and a little bit on product. And the two of us at the start, we kind of spent our time, Des primarily building out the platform. I was trying to sell it to anyone that was willing to pay money and buy it. And between the two of us, we were doing customer support. And so we were sharing that between us, making sure support is something that's really key for us in LearnUpon. We see it as a differentiator. And it was something we really focused heavily on in the early days. But we realized as we started to get, I think we were about 20, 30 customers on board, being so focused on support was sacrificing other areas. It was slowing down the amount of time Des could spend building out the product, and it was having an impact on how much time I could spend on sales. And so that was, for us, that was that kind of trigger point where we felt, okay, A, we should try and raise some money, and B, we need to think about building out a team. And it was late 2013, we met our first, I guess, non-founder hire when Shane joined the team as our first customer support rep. And that worked really well. Shane came in, he was able to do a lot of that frontline support. And again, it allowed myself and Des to focus on the other areas of the business. I agree with Sandra, like that first hire, it's a big thing for the company. Both for myself and Des. I was chatting to Brian the other day. I was like, that was the point where we were like, this is real. At that point, you don't have a lot of cash. There might be some months you can't pay yourself, but myself and Des knew what we were getting into. I think when Shane joined, we were like, okay, now we have to make payroll every month. And so our first hires, they took a chance on us, as a company. I think during that process, and as we were interviewing and talking to people, we wanted to find people who were really kind of bought into the journey we were going on, but also understood the risks involved. It is a startup. Not all startups are successful. And so we wanted to make sure that, I suppose, Shane and Stevo and Caroline, our early hires, knew what they were getting into. And I think as part of that, when you get people like that, they really buy into that journey. Our early hires are, now with us 8, 9, 10 years. To Sandra's point, they've played a massive part in building the great culture that we have in LearnUpon. And I guess as we went on that journey, you kind of start to scale out from there. But that was the driver for us. It certainly was an important milestone, and it gave us the confidence to build from there.
It's such a massive thing, going from, let's say, the founders who are working every hour that they can in order to get something off the ground to now having that first hire. And it's really interesting what you said there, Sandra, about the cultural fit and making sure that everybody is kind of singing to the same drum in a way. How far at the beginning did you jump into that cultural fit? Did you have the idea of different... did you define what the culture was before you made that hire? Did you have a good idea of what that is? Did you write down those different aspects of what the business meant to you at that point so that you could find the right person to fit that piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, we did. It's something we did early on, was to think about our values. What is it we value? How do we want people to show up in the company? And I think for us as founders, we're very diverse. You know, we're different backgrounds, different ages, different parts of the world. And when you put all that together, I think you need to take the time to figure out, right, what are we trying to build here? What is the culture? Because our own perspectives on that could be something that's very different. So we took the time to write down our values, think about the type of organization that we want, you know, very much focused on impact. And that became part of our job descriptions then. So we've written that in, and we didn't write the traditional job specs. You know, it was very much focused on what it's like to be part of our organization and what's expected from you from a cultural perspective as well as your skills. And I think something just to add on to what you were talking about the last time, Brendan, transferable skills in the early days are so important, right? So, you know, you might be hiring for somebody that's their core skill set, but actually what you're checking is what's the 2 or 3 other things that you can get them to do as well. And I think when you're growing, you have to have that adaptability in people as well.
Amazing. Brendan, when you think about the cultural diversity and how that played an impact in hiring as you moved further down the timeline into the success of LearnUpon, how did that impact your recruitment process, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's something like it evolves over time, and like we were very focused on culture in the early days. It took us a while to actually write it down and like kind of have what we called at the time our learning path, and it was kind of those attributes and values that we were looking for and that people were hopefully looking for in a company that they wanted to join. From our perspective, diversity was a big thing that we wanted to focus on, but we did realize, I guess maybe a couple of years into the journey, in certain teams we were struggling. We felt we weren't doing a good enough job when it came to diversity. One area was in sales. I think as we started to add more account managers, I think we got up to about 8 or 9 in our sales team, and they were all men, and that was something we weren't happy about. So we realized we had to, from a recruitment perspective, really focus on that and look at where we tried to get the LearnUpon name out there. We did a lot of work with TUD to get grads to join LearnUpon in as SDRs, who soon became BDRs and soon became account managers. And I think that has been really, really good for us. We saw a similar in our R&D team, which is mainly based in Belgrade in Serbia. And again, it's probably like a lot of tech companies, it was mostly men at the start. So we, again, decided, like, how can we proactively address this to bring more diversity into our team? We got involved at Rails Girls in Belgrade, which is kind of weekend coding workshops for women in Serbia. And we became the main sponsor. Our team went and ran those sessions at the weekend, and it became a key recruitment platform for us to bring amazing developers into our team. And so it's something I think as we grow, we're constantly working on. In 2016, we started to hire in the States. And again, we looked as we kind of build our team to try and have as much diversity as we can. But it's not easy, because I think as you're a scaling startup and you have lots of open roles, you can have those pressure points where we need somebody in the seat doing this job. And the temptation, I guess, can be like to hire maybe the first candidate that comes in and has the skill set and experience, but maybe isn't bringing enough diversity to the team. So I'm particularly interested. I know this is Sandra's kind of main area of focus, and so it's really interesting to see that there's platforms out there to help with companies like us to address things like that.
I'll be back on to you about that one.
I'm exactly in the same boat. I would love to hear your answer to the same question, Sandra. Do you want me to repeat it? Yeah. It's really around just when looking further into the recruitment process and as the team size started to grow, how did diversity play an impact in the role of the recruitment process, and how did that get defined and baked into the recruitment process in Inclusio?
Yeah, I think I remember I was on the stage here, it was probably about 3 years ago, and I was asked a question. So our tech team, initially we had 9 developers and we had 8 women. And I remember somebody asking, how did we do that? And the one piece of advice I gave was change where you look. And that's exactly what you described, Brendan. Like, if you keep looking in the same places and advertising and saying things in the same way, you're going to get same. And I think when you're in a startup and that early stage, you're running at 100 miles an hour, and sometimes you don't slow things down to make sure you have a diverse set of candidates on the slate. And it does involve sometimes changing where you look, change where you advertise. You might be encouraging, your network to ask people to come in, because if you have diversity on the slate, you're more likely to recruit a diverse candidate. More likely, the best person for the job is going to get the job, but you're just more likely to recruit diversity. Like, we've 18 different nationalities in our company. We actively seek diversity. And I think it's much harder to re-engineer, as Brendan described there, right? Where you have 9 of the same people in a team. It's very difficult to kind of roll that back and to try and address that. So you're better off just from the beginning, make it part of your focus, and consciously think about your job specs, consciously think about where you advertise, and take the time to make sure you have a good spectrum of candidates ready to apply for the job.
Fantastic. It's great to see some questions coming in as well, so keep them rolling in. It'll be fantastic. Another question, actually, just to touch on a point there as well on diversity. So I founded a product agency that essentially helps companies of all sizes to build product. And one of the biggest pluses that we've ever had within the company is having a diverse workforce where we're able to look at different vantage points when building a product. It helps us to grow that product at such a phenomenally faster rate rather than being pigeonholed in any kind of creative thinking or imaginative process. But just to jump forward, the next question that I'd have is, when you look at, essentially coming from the very beginning all the way through to the work that you've both accomplished now, what would be one major challenge or one major period of growth that you have been through that you could potentially touch on some of the challenges that you had to face or overcome during that path? I'll start with Brendan, if that's okay.
I think for us, we started selling to small companies, SMBs, and over the last 10, 11 years, we've gone on a journey to move into mid-market and into the large enterprise. And there's obviously lots of pluses in moving up market. It's a higher ACV, bigger logos, bigger deal sizes. But to win those deals, there's challenges there in terms of where it brings your product. And then all the supporting infrastructure. If you want to close a deal with a Fortune 500 company, suddenly you have all these requirements where they might love your product, love your team, but then, have you got security requirements? Have you got ISO? Have you got SOC 2? And I think we went through a phase for a couple of years where you're trying to get that trade-off to bring scale out the team, bring as much of that experience that you need to be able to close those bigger deals. And that takes a lot of effort. It takes investment, and I guess the trade-off there is hopefully you can close more revenue and continue to scale the business. But I think that was an area where we're trying to get the balance right, that it doesn't become too much of a distraction, and that maybe you can chase some deals or logos that you're just not ready for yet. So we talked a lot of kind of a leadership team of trying to build our muscle and be really selective in picking, 2 or 3 bigger opportunities that we knew would stretch us and pull us in the right direction, but to also be able to say no to other exciting opportunities, but realize, if we go here, it could actually slow us down and damage what we're building. So it was certainly tricky to get that balance right, but then once you start getting a few of those bigger opportunities under your belt and you build that muscle, you get better at it, and then over time it becomes second nature. So I would say that was probably one of the tricky things for us.
Fantastic. Could I ask the same question?
Yeah, I think just to build on that, I think as a small company, what we've done, it's the same challenge, isn't it? It's that scale. What we've done is very much focused from a sector perspective, so recognizing early on that we can't be all things to all people. You can't do that. And something that's worked really well for us is, building our credibility and our expertise. We're working with a particular sector, and it's worked well for us. And then using that, the references and the case studies and the proof points from that then to move into other sectors. I think just briefly, one of the other challenges, I suppose, for myself, I have a broad network. I spent 20 years working in the tech industry, but I didn't have a network of VC investors. And we spun out of DCU on the 1st of December 2020 into COVID. And we had no way of meeting people. And I only knew one person, an angel investor who's here. And I had to try and navigate my way around from that, And I think that that's very difficult for startups, is if you don't naturally have connections into the VC world, where do you start and how do you go about that? And it's something that's not to be underestimated, because I think from the very beginning, you have that idea in your head and you're about to get your startup going and your idea, always be thinking, if investment is the route you're going, how can you start to bring your investors along that journey with you through your R&D or whatever path you're taking? I think it's something, don't leave it till the end, right? Something that you think of early on.
Fantastic. Okay. I say fantastic a lot. We've got a lot of questions coming in, so let's do a quick fire buzz around here. Brendan, how do you reward those early employees who've selected the startup risk over the stable companies?
So what we did pretty early on the journey is we put an ESOP in place for our team. So at the time we put 10% of the business. We've since increased it to over 13%. For employees. We took the decision that everyone in LearnUpon would partake in the ESOP, and one of the I guess values we have, we talk about acting like an owner, and I often say to the team, everyone in LearnUpon is an owner, a part owner of the business, and I think that means a lot. Like I think the reality is it can be very difficult. You're competing with the big tech companies in Ireland, lots of great benefits and things like that. We knew you can't compete on that. I think so being a part owner was one thing, and the other thing I think is giving people meaningful work then where they can have an impact. I remember we had about 50 people, and I was interviewing someone, and they were also considering an offer from Workday at the time. We had 5,000 people, and part of my sales pitch interview process was, would you prefer to be employee number 51 in LearnUpon and help us grow to 5,000 people, or do you want to be employee number 5,001 in Workday? Workday are an amazing company, and they've continued to grow. But I think that's kind of what we had to sell, because at the end of the day, if you're just trying to compete on money or benefits, it's you're not going to, you can't win on that front. So a great culture, meaningful work, giving people responsibility to have an impact has worked well for us.
Fantastic. And Sandra, do you think a remote-first approach can help scale an early startup? So no cost of an office and global talent pools are the benefits.
I don't think there's one single answer to that, because I think it depends on what your business is doing. Like if I think about our business, we had no choice. We had 2 years of COVID, so we were all remote, and in some ways it kind of sped the machine up for us. Now, we're based in Dogpatch Labs. It's fantastic. We've dedicated desks. We kind of do it 2 to 3 days a week you're in. I'm in most days. But we have some of our tech team in other parts of the world, that every so often they come and visit us. I think you have to think about your business. Certainly what I've learned is that if you're bringing younger people in or graduates in, for them to kind of get up to speed on what you're doing, they kind of need a little, they need to gel with the others in the team and learn how you do things around here. So I do think there needs to be a period of that kind of them getting to know how you do things so you get the best out of them. Yeah. And I think that's the big social experiment that's going on at the moment, right? We have a whole load of people that went into organizations and didn't get the opportunity to build social capital, didn't get the opportunity to understand, politically how do things get done in this organization. And I don't know what impact that's going to have on their careers now over the next kind of 3 to 5 years. And we're not going to know really until it plays out. So I think that there's no single answer. It has to be what's right for your business and for the people who are working for you.
Great. Brendan, did you pivot at any point from your original idea, or has there ever been a change?
Not really, to be honest. Where we started, myself and Des had worked in the e-learning LMS space previously, so we were fairly set on kind of what we wanted to do and the type of company we wanted to build. I would say in terms of pivot, we did do that journey of moving up market. In the early days, we sold to very small training companies, kind of had you could sign up for the platform for $99 a month, pay month to month. We have moved away from that and gone, I suppose, more into the corporate space and more up market. But I would say no major pivots. We went into a very mature industry that's quite a crowded space, but we felt we knew the value we could bring with our product in terms of addressing some of the pain points of legacy solutions.
Fantastic. Well, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Sandra and Brendan for being here today. A big round of applause. Thanks, everyone.